Welcome to 12 Gauge Investigative.
In the shadows where the truth hides deep, echoes of the lost and the secrets they keep. Cold cases burn in the back of your mind. We dig through the dark, one, two at a time. This ain't fiction, this is blood, this is truth. 12 Gauge Investigative, justice uncaged. We ask the questions they're too scared to say, shining a light where the guilty pray. From killers to whispers, we won't look away.
November 13th, 2022. In a quiet college town tucked into the hills of northern Idaho, 4 students brutally murdered in the dead of night. No forced entry, no cries for help, and for weeks, no answers. Rising tension in music. What followed was a storm, rumors, Reddit theories, TikTok psychics. But beneath the noise, the evidence began to whisper. A car seen circling the neighborhood, a phone that went dark, a knife sheath left behind with a single trace of DNA, and a name emerged, Brian Koberger, a 28-year-old criminology student, studying the criminal mind while allegedly becoming one. But this case isn't solved by headlines. It's solved by patience, by the convergence of science, data, and motive. This is The Long Game, Idaho 4, and the Path of Evidence. I'm your host, and today, on 12 Gauge Investigative, we're unraveling the timeline, the forensics, and the psychological threads of the most chilling case in recent memory.
All right. How's everybody doing? Did y'all enjoy that? Man, you know how long it takes me to do some of these things that I do? I hope you guys are doing all right. My name is 12 Gauge, and this is my channel, 12 Gauge Investigative. How's everybody doing? We have a room full of people already. That's always great to see. Great to see. So tonight, I thought I'd come in here and I'd do a little bit of reading. I know it's not everybody's favorite thing, but it's almost to the end of the book, so we do want to finish up and see what happens at the end of the book, right? Is that not true? Who did my voiceover for what? Obviously, it was female, right? Wasn't me. Walt Harris, how you doing? Jeff H, Rondi Potter, PKC, and some other people coming up strong. So let me go ahead and get started with this. That way we can talk about some more stuff that we got to talk about later on. I do want to get this part over with because I want to finish this book up. This is chapter 50. Y'all don't run out. I mean, this book is just really interesting. I mean, wouldn't it be cool if he kind of lets us know how it ends? Because, you know, we all want to know how it ends. Oh, damn, somebody just booked it out of here. Come back. It's really not that boring, I promise. Yeah, I found a cool voiceover. It was pretty good. Yeah, somebody just ran out. He's gonna read. I'm out of here. Um, well, anyways, if you want to be here, I'm going to finish up this book hopefully in a little bit. If not, I'm going to talk Idaho 4 for a while. We're on chapter 50. It was still Christmas break when news of Brian Koberger's arrest in connection with the King Road homicides hit the national headlines. Most students were at home with their families preparing for New Year's Eve when they heard of the alleged perpetrator's capture. There was a general sense of relief and also astonishment as they learned more about Koberger, the PhD candidate in criminology who allegedly lurked among them for weeks after the killings. In just a few days, students would start to return to the University of Idaho campus. Some would feel comfortable walking to classes again, while others, no matter that a suspect had been caught, would remain frightened. They would barely leave their dormitories at first, and there would be an uptick in food orders from the Starship fleet of robots on campus. 15 gleaming white six-wheeled autonomous containers capable of navigating the U of I sidewalks and wooded pathways through winter weather. On the morning of January 4th, Koberger was loaded by Pennsylvania State into a single-engine fixed-wing aircraft that seated 11. The plane departed and took a northern route across the country. It landed twice to refuel, and by evening the plane was wheeled down and the state police were ready to transfer their cargo. I don't know if y'all remember that night when they were flying Koberger back, but there was a lot of us that were watching it on some kind of I don't even know what that flight thing was called, where you're watching the plane actually fly from Pennsylvania to Idaho. There was a lot of us watching that on live streams. I mean, I thought it was pretty interesting. Um, you know, to watch that plane take off from Pennsylvania all the way to Idaho. It said Koberger's transport was met by Idaho State police officers at the Pullman Moscow Regional Airport just across the border in Washington State. It was long past dark when Koberger, in handcuffs and shackles, was led across the tarmac to a caravan of vehicles. He was then driven back into Idaho and booked into the 37-inmate Latah County Jail. It's not a very big jail. He was kept out of the general population for his safety and the safety of others, and there were plans in place to accommodate his strict vegan diet, which he had reportedly turned 2 years earlier while searching for a remedy to his visual snow syndrome. Meanwhile, the Idaho State Police were continuing to process the evidence taken from Koberger's apartment, identifying items in a variety of post-search documents, including evidence logs, chemical testing logs, and narrative reports written by law enforcement personnel. From two closets on the north wall of the entryway, they'd retrieved a single black nitrile-type glove, receipts from Marshalls and Walmart, the dust container from Koberger's inexpensive Bissell Power Force vacuum, and possible hair strands from the head of a broom. From under the computer pad on Koberger's desk, they retrieved a possible animal hair strand, which was notable because Koberger had no pets. Crime scene analysis had also removed a possible human hair from the wall of his shower and multiple hairs from inside the shower drain. Wow. See, I mean, we didn't know any of this stuff. This has been in this book all the time, and we didn't even read it. Isn't that crazy if this is correct? Hey, Allie Brooks, how you doing? So if they retrieved a possible hair strand, animal hair strand under his computer pad, and then they also removed possible human hair from the wall of his shower and multiple hairs from inside the shower drain. And you're saying, yeah, those were probably Kobergers. You don't think they know the difference? You don't think that they would have known the difference? From Koberger's kitchen, according to chemical testing logs, they removed a white towel from a diluted, irregular reddish-brown stain. There were multiple other items with similarly colored stains in the kitchen, including on the counter, inside a drawer, on a screwdriver, and a bottle of Ajax soap. Along the back of the countertop microwave and on two switches behind the sink. Other reddish brown stains appeared inside and outside two bedroom closet doors and between the fibers on a towel found on a nearby stool. Well, before I go on, I wanna kind of pick your mind here. What was what could have been that reddish brownish stain? You think it was iodine? Do you think it was something that was used to kind of wipe down all over the apartment? What do y'all think? Whoa, you read my mind, bro. That's what I thought. It was iodine. I was like, what else would make a reddish brown stain like that? I don't necessarily think that it would have been blood per se, dried blood, but iodine possibly to wipe stuff down. Would that kill um, DNA? Would that kill any kind of fingerprints, any kind of stuff? I don't know if iodine would do that. Iodine's usually used to kind of right before you have some kind of incision, right? Cuts, yeah. Do you think he might have had cuts on his hands and that's why there was iodine everywhere? That's interesting, right? And it sounds like iodine don't clean up too good, so who knows? So it says reddish brown stains. Multiple irregular red stains were found on the exterior of the bedroom door. Red brown stains were found in the bedroom door jamb, along both the interior and the exterior of the bathroom door, and within the bathroom itself, including along the edges of the medicine cabinet, wooden vanity countertop, and cabinets in the door jamb to the separate toilet room within the bathroom. Can one of you go look at that picture of him doing this and see if there's any reddish kind of tint on his hand that would possibly be iodine? I miss methylate inside and outside the closet. Hey, serious? Could it be anything else? Because it's all over this place, whatever the hell that reddish brown stain is. I mean, do y'all believe that it's dried blood? There was a brownish colored stain on the underside of a rug beneath the coffee table, and a similar stain on the carpeting beneath the rug. So they found a lot of these red stains. What the hell was it? Kool-Aid? What was it? What do y'all think it was? I had a bottle of iodine fall on the top of the fridge and broke. Bottle bounced out of sight. I thought I came home to a crime scene. Okay. Give me your opinion of what you think these reddish brown stains are because they're obviously everywhere. There were two additional reddish brown stains on an uncased pillow top Koberger's bed. The largest stain immediately tested positive for blood. Uh-oh. As did an irregular looking brown drip on the mattress cover. Uh-oh. So all these multiple red stains, we didn't hear about any of this stuff. We heard about the reddish stains on the uncased pillow, and we heard about the how one of them tested positive for blood, but we didn't know there was a drip on the mattress cover. Out in the world, reaction to Koberger's arrest was dominating coffee shop talk. And inside the Latah County Jail in the basement of the courthouse, Brian Koberger was held in a solitary confinement cell that a previous inmate had said was too short for a 6-foot person to remain comfortable inside. The bed was inside the toilet. Or, wow, too bad it wasn't, right? The bed was beside the toilet, and if he slept with his head in that direction, the smell would be foul. If he slept with his head toward the bars, the quarter lights would hit his face. Mounted cameras were trained into the cells, none of which were in good condition, according to an ex-inmate, Corey Glim. The paint is all chipped off, it's rusty, the drains are full of nasty filth, it's midway in there, mildewy in there, the ceilings are extremely short, Clem told News Nation. It's just a small claustrophobic metal box. It's not fun. Koberger was the only person known to be housed in the maximum security holding area at the time. He was alone with his thoughts, although his Tapatalk ruminations from years earlier offered clues what they might have been. So anybody saying anything about the reddish brown thing? Um, Flush. Anybody have any idea what those reddish brown things could have been? So this is what Brian obviously wrote in Tapatalk. We've heard about it. I've had this horrible depersonalization go on in my life for almost 2 years. I often find myself making simple human interactions, but it's as if I am playing a role-playing game. I feel like an organic sack of meat with no self-worth. I am starting to view everyone as this. It's an organic sack of meat? Okay. Everything I have ever done makes no sense. How did things get this way? How am I wearing this shirt? And who decided that humans shall wear shirts like this? Are we all just advanced animals with possession? Or is there more? More that I can't see? I can't connect. I view everything as if I was playing Oblivion, pointless and full of nothing, out of reality. As my family group hugs and celebrates, I am stuck in this void of nothing, feeling completely no emotion, feeling nothing. I feel dirty, like there is a dirt inside of my head, my mind. I'm always dizzy and confused. I am intelligent, but I feel the opposite. I say things I don't mean. As I hug my family, I look into their faces. I see nothing. It is like I am looking at a video game, but less. It is like I have severe brain damage. I'm stuck in the depths of my mind where I have to constantly battle my demons. Am I here or am I fake? I feel myself slipping away. I hear screams faintly, but I constantly battle away from it. So, do you think those screams he hears could be schizophrenia? You don't see anything in the shower photo? Okay. Do you think those screams could be a byproduct of schizophrenia? We did search one night for the game Oblivion and we found some gameplay of a guy going into a bedroom and killing someone in bed. What are the chances of that? Okay. It is like, well, he says, I hear screams faintly and he's trying to get away from his demons, but I constantly battle away from it. I think about my father, what a good man he is, how I treat him like dirt because I have this condition and I can't take it. Now I look in the mirror and I see this sickly, tired, useless, and stupid man in the mirror. He is a complete disgrace. He doesn't even deserve to live. I remember when I was 15, I would wander alone at 2 a.m. Everything was so generic. Nowhere felt like home. I saw things that were not there, a different reality. I felt eerie and alone. I died during those nights. I felt like a criminal. But where was my record? Oh, this does sound a little bit out there, doesn't it? He saw things that were not there. He heard screams in his head. I'm not trying to look into things bigger than they should be, but doesn't that sound a little troubling? A little troubling indeed. Chapter 51. In a small courtroom in Latah County, Brian Koberger made his first court appearance on January 5th, one day after returning to Idaho. He was brought in without cuffs. He wore an orange jumper with the word prisoner across its back in black lettering. He was cleanly shaven, but the hairs along the back of his neck had grown unkempt while in jail. Koberger sat beside his court appointed public defender, Ann Taylor, who was also chief of the nearby Kootenai County Public Defender's Office. Taylor was one of the only handful of Idaho public defenders qualified to represent clients in death penalty cases. That was important since the prosecution would likely seek to sentence with a guilty verdict. Not only was the death penalty legal in Idaho, but Idaho would soon become one of the only 5 states to authorize death by firing squad in cases where nitrogen hypoxia, lethal injection, and electrocution were held unconstitutional or otherwise unavailable. Taylor had periodically defended Xana Kernodle's mom against her drug charges. Now she was defending the man accused of being Xana's killer. The judge, Megan Marshall, apprised Koberger of the charges against them, which included unlawful entry into the King Road residence and 4 felony counts of murder in the first degree for premeditately causing the deaths of Kaylee, Maddie, Xana, and Ethan by stabbing. Marshall's face showed no emotion as she addressed Koberger. The maximum penalty for this offense, if you were to plead guilty or to be found guilty, is death or imprisonment for life. Do you understand? Judge Marshall asked for each of the murder charges were read aloud. Yes, Koberger said each time, leaning into the desk-mounted microphone before him. After the charges had been read, Marshall added, would you like to represent yourself, hire a lawyer, or see if you qualify for court-appointed counsel? I have court-appointed counsel, Koberger told her into the microphone, acknowledging Ann Taylor's presence beside him. Court has reviewed your application for an attorney at public expense, Judge Marshall told him. I do find that you are indigent and do qualify for court-appointed counsel. I will appoint Miss Taylor to represent you in this case. Koberger was denied bail and remanded to state custody until a status hearing could be held 1 week later to decide on a timeline for his trial. He was also served with a no-contact order preventing him from attempting to communicate with Dylan Mortensen, Bethany Funk, and the family members of the King Road homicide victims. Koberger had nodded politely and appeared calm throughout the proceedings. On January 12th, he was again brought into Judge Marshall's courtroom. He was again clean-shaven, only today there were fresh cuts on his face from his jail-issue razor that looked like cat scratches across his jawline. His hair looked shiny as if recently washed. Cameras from national networks were filming him from the public gallery in the back. In keeping with the sometimes perplexing nature of the American court system, the purpose of the day's status hearing was to determine the future date of a required preliminary hearing. In layman's shorthand, whereas the previous week was about reading Koberger's charges, this week was about figuring out when or if he would face them. Under his right to a speedy trial, designed so that people accused of a crime don't endlessly languish in jail without proof of their guilt, Koberger would be allowed a preliminary hearing within 14 days of the January 12th court appearance. At that time, another judge would review evidence provided by the prosecution and defense and possibly hear from the witnesses. A preliminary hearing is, in a sense, a mini trial, like a teaser to a movie, in which an appointed judge can get a sense of how a case might play out and decide whether there is sufficient evidence to move forward or if charges should be dropped altogether. See, if we would have had a preliminary, we wouldn't be where we're at today. If they wouldn't have messed with the grand jury, if they wouldn't have did the grand jury thing, we wouldn't be where we're at today. We would have done the preliminary. We would have, the dude was innocent. He was innocent. Maybe not even taking it to trial. But here we are. It was also Koberger's prerogative to waive his right to a speedy trial and remain in jail while his attorney made preparations. In that case, a preliminary hearing could be set for months out. This is often good strategy when a defendant is facing serious charges, since it gives legal teams more time to build a defense. And she's still arguing that she doesn't have an argument for her defense side. She needs more time. Ann Taylor stood before the judge and requested such an extension. There she was, already requesting one. We're going to ask the court to set the preliminary hearing out into June. She said, Mr. Koberger understands his right to a timely preliminary hearing and he's willing to waive the timeliness to allow us time to obtain discovery in this case. Discovery was the term used for the prosecution's evidence against her client. So there she was already requesting an extension till June. And that was like what? February? This lady's all about stalling. The prosecutor, Bill Thompson, stood up in agreement, his long white beard reaching down to his thigh. The state had no objection to that, Your Honor. Koberger's next court date was set for June 26th, over 5 months away. He was removed from the courtroom by a sheriff deputy gripping his left arm. Judge Marshall had also issued a gag order preventing public discussion of the case by any member of law enforcement or the court system, or any other entity associated with the case, including family members of the victims and their representatives. In essence, due to the intense media interest in the King Road homicides, Judge Marshall was shutting out the media going forward in order to maintain the integrity of the case and to ensure an unbiased jury should the case go to trial. God, we've been hearing that forever. The media wasn't happy, as their sources who had been close to the investigation, such as cops in the Moscow PD, would dry up under the threat of legal action by the state of Idaho. A contingent of dozens of media outlets unsuccessfully sued to remove the gag order. So did Kaylee's father, Steve Gonsalves, who wanted to keep his daughter's story alive in the press and who wanted to see that Koberger got what was coming to him. Justice is when you leave the planet, he told News Nation, explaining why he thought his daughter's killers should be sentenced to death. If you want to play God's role, you're going to have to answer to him. Ironically, the opinion piece decrying the death penalty that Marianne Koberger had written for the Pocono Record 15 years earlier now seemed like a foreshadowing of her own deepest fear, losing her son. State sanctified murder, still just that, Marianne wrote. Murder. And I asked the other day if y'all believed in the death penalty, and there was a lot of you that said you did, and there were some of you that said that you didn't. Is it true that Brian fired her? If Brian fired her, he could get another attorney and start over. Well, it would kind of reset things, but he's not going to get, as much time as, another year or something like that. I wouldn't think. I think probably 6 months, if that. Chapter 52. The media did know the totality of the evidence against Koberger. All anybody outside law enforcement could know for certain was the probable cause affidavit for Koberger's arrest had spelled out. The affidavit was a multi-page document used to prove just enough evidence to get a judge to sign off on a warrant to take Koberger into custody in Pennsylvania. It didn't have to list all the evidence, only enough for probable cause, the current standard for an arrest. The affidavit emphasized Koberger's alleged familial DNA found on the K-bar knife sheath at the King Road crime scene, his white Hyundai caught on security cameras near the scene at the approximate time of the arrest, and his cell phone pinging the tower, servicing the King Road residence at the same time. It had also noted Koberger's cell pinging there late at night a dozen times previously. So he just said and his cell phone pinging the tower servicing the King Road residence at the same time. So was he? I don't know. It makes it sound like his cell phone was pinging at the King Road residence at the same time of the murders. It had also noted Koberger's cell pinging there late at night a dozen times previously, as if he'd been stalking the victims in the months leading up to their murders. And Koberger's interest in law enforcement and criminology studies were mentioned, along with his recently posted Reddit survey asking criminals about their states of mind, which to the media now looked like a bid for tips of the trade, not academic research. Then there was Dylan Mortensen's statement about seeing a masked man who fit Koberger's general description. So, what do y'all think so far? The man she saw was Caucasian, roughly Koberger's height and build, and with bushy eyebrows. And she'd remembered from the small facial area what remained exposed. While Koberger's eyebrows were not much bushier than those of an average man of his age, his brow itself was prominent. He fit the description. After his arrest and subsequent jailing in Idaho, the probable cause affidavit was released under public information laws. With the gag order in place, the affidavit was the next best thing for the media to scour. To most, Koberger looked like a guy who would go to his death in prison. Many of the criminal defense attorneys weighing in publicly, however, saw gaping holes in what the probable cause affidavit had presented. Mark Garagos was one of the attorneys who saw ways for Koberger's team to argue that some of the evidence was insufficient. Garagos has represented celebrity clients, including Michael Jackson, Winona Ryder, NBA star Scottie Pippen, and former NFL player Colin Kaepernick, along with a slew of people facing charges of murder or attempted murder, including UFC star Cain Velasquez, who several months before the King Road murders shot into a car people driving away with a man who'd been accused of molesting Velasquez's young relatives. According to Garagos, who appeared on TV in the days after Koberger's arrest, the probable cause affidavit was flimsy at best. It had holes that you could drive a Mack truck through, Garagos said. He was joined on one network by Marcia Clark, famously the lead prosecutor in the O.J. Simpson murder trial. Okay, where's my mouse? I can't tell you the number of murder cases where the prosecution's cell phone evidence ended up exonerating my client as opposed to showing that he was guilty. Garagos said, as I'm sitting right here, I could be using my phone and it could be pinging on the two towers 12 miles away from each other just by virtue of the amount of traffic on one of the towers. Cell phone tower evidence was a good tool to approximate distance, Garagos said, but Koberger could just as easily have been a mile away from the King Road residence as 10 feet. He did not have to be driving on King Road on the dozens of occasions previous to the homicide to have pinged the tower that serviced it. Garagos was additionally suspicious of the affidavit's argument that Koberger turning his phone off around the time of the murders somehow implied that he was guilty. There were many reasons the phone could be turned off, and it was the prosecution's burden of proof Koberger's guilt, not imply it. If the defense offered a believable alternative reason for his phone being turned off, a jury would, by instruction of the judge, have to discredit the prosecution's previous speculations. You got to pick the one that points toward innocence, Garagos said, meaning that the two viable options for Koberger's behavior should by law lead to finding of not guilty in the face of reasonable doubt, which is the constitutional standard juries are supposed to adhere to. I agree, Marcia Clark said, and she was anything but light on crime. As they say, in fact, she had spent 50 years dedicated to prosecuting and studying it. Garagos later appeared on News Nation beside Jim Clemente, a former New York City prosecutor and FBI profiler. The two engaged in a counterpoint debate about the strength of the probable cause affidavit, primarily addressing the cellular data tracking of Koberger and the touch DNA on the K-bar sheath. I kind of remember this. I kind of do. Um, they were like going back and forth saying that the PCA was irrelevant, all that stuff. The DNA evidence is extremely strong, Clemente said. Coupled with the other circumstantial type evidence they have listed in the affidavit, it certainly points to one person, and that person is in custody right now. Garagos was not so certain. In his time as a defense attorney, he had seen too many suspects charged with crimes they hadn't committed. Okay. Nowadays, probable cause is my client breathing. He joked about what he believed to be loosening of protocols for charging suspected criminals. What they found was a suspect profile on the sheath. We don't know where the sheath was specifically. We don't know how it got there. He was insinuating that the existence of the sheath in the King Road residence was not the same as having proof that Brian Koberger had entered the residence. So this is where people got their theory from, that they've been going on and on and on for these 2.5 years from this dude. I wondered where they got their theory from, let alone committed the 4 murders. A good defense attorney could argue that somebody else had left behind the sheath or that Koberger had been in the residence on another occasion with the sheath, but not on the occasion of the murders. Why would he be in the residence another time with the sheath, but just not on the occasion of the murders? Or even that he had been in the residence without the sheath on another occasion and that his DNA had been left behind, and the sheath had inadvertently been contaminated by it. See, defense attorneys are professional liars, is what they are, in my opinion. They really are. Um, they really are. Because did you see how he just put all that right there? And he's standing before a jury saying, well, I believe that this could have happened because of this, this, and this, and this. But if you're really reading it, you're like, okay, so he entered the residence without the sheath, left his DNA there, and then somehow the sheath made its way back into the residence. I'm just confused. What if Koberger had been stalking the victim but hadn't killed them? These are the what if questions of defense lawyers. What if his reason for being in the area on 12 previous occasions was that he had a friend in the nearby apartments? Reasonable doubt, right? So, what if? What if he was picking flowers along King Road and digging up the plants with his knife sheath or with his K-bar and dropped his knife sheath, and one of the girls found it, took it into the room, and so that night when they were stabbed, his knife sheath ended up under one of the murdered victims, having his DNA under the button snap. He wasn't in the residence, but his knife sheath was. Stupid. I mean, it just really is. It's dumb. I've heard a lot of defense attorneys, and they're proud of their theories, man. It's like, are you really hearing yourself? Are you really presenting this to the jury? And are they really going to believe you? When convincing a suspect of murder, the law required proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And without the murder weapon or more than just a single touch of DNA on a piece of leather, if that was the only physical evidence the police had gathered from the King Road crime scene, then the case could successfully challenge, Garagos believed. Well, my question is this. Why didn't he take the case pro bono? Why didn't he step up and defend Koberger? If he's so certain that, he had a bunch of loopholes, why didn't he? Why didn't he take it pro bono and defend him? Why isn't he one of the people on the defense? That's a fair question, right? Isn't it? Is that not a fair question, chat? Oh, I hate this time delay. Is that not a fair question? If he's so good at what he does and he's like presenting all these what ifs, just like multitudes of other people, what kept him from going and defending Koberger? I mean, he could have done it pro bono. He continued to explain that there was room to explore human error as well as database error in the comparison between Koberger's father's DNA and his own. Of course, we can look at something and we can put a million theories behind it. But for whatever reason, that one theory that points to guilt, nobody ever touches it. Nobody even looks that direction. It could be slapping them in the face, and they're like, nope, nope, I'm not going to look at that. But let's look at this over here because this makes more sense, right? They rummaged through the trash. They found some DNA, Garrigo said with a grin. See how he's doing it? They rummaged through the trash and found some DNA. So they were just rummaging through and they happened to find some DNA. It was easy to see where he was going with this. Anything could have been contaminated by anything else in the trash. If the DNA evidence from either the garbage bin or the knife sheath was too degraded a sample, it could be discredited in court. As we now know that DNA on that knife sheath was not degradable, and it was huge enough to have a profile. And then where would the prosecution's case be? So if anybody in the public knew that single trace of DNA was the only biological evidence pointing to Koberger's guilt. The rest was circumstantial, and the defense could argue many things. He was a nut, he was obsessed, a stalker, he was bad, but he didn't kill those girls. Garagos wasn't alone in pointing out additional flaws in the DNA evidence. The DNA is nice to have, former CIA officer Tracy Walder said. It puts him at the scene of the crime, but it doesn't put him at the scene of the crime on the day and around that time. How come that sentence doesn't make sense to me? How come that sentence doesn't make sense to me? Does it make sense to y'all? Did you hear what she just said? It puts him at the scene of the crime, but it doesn't put him at the scene of the crime on the day and around that time. So how the hell did that knife sheath get there under Maddie if he didn't do it? Where's the knife that he ordered on Amazon? Now that we know more, right? So we're able to just add some stuff now that obviously at the time of writing this book they didn't have. Then she said, this is a hole that can be poked in the prosecution's case. Of course, and they're probably going to try it. Koberger's public defender seemed ready to start enlarging that hole and brought in a second attorney to assist with the case. What nobody in the public knew, because the information hadn't been released yet, was that a DNA swab taken from inside Brian Koberger's cheek after his arrest was a statistical match for the DNA that had been found on a knife sheath the perpetrator had left behind. It had apparently been his father's DNA that allowed for Koberger to be taken into custody, but it looked like his own DNA would keep him there. Let me read what y'all are saying. 320 feet radius. That's pretty close. 23 times. No, thank goodness. I don't know what you're saying. It puts him on a piece of very probable evidence Yeah. But if we were going to what if it to death, what if, what if, what if? What if it was his sheath? Maybe he was in the house with the sheath one night and left it behind, and somehow or another it walked its way up the stairs on the night of the murders, and it was so scared, just like the girl, then dove under Maddie's leg to protect itself from getting stabbed also. What if that happened? Hey, JB. See, those are the kind of things that I mean, not exactly, but it's kind of like that. Whenever you're hearing a defense attorney argue their point, it's like that. It's like the knife sheath walked its way up the stairs one night because it heard the dog, and then it saw the killer stabbing Maddie, and then it got scared, and he jumped under Maddie's leg because it didn't want to get stabbed either. And since Brian had that sheath, that's how his DNA got under there. Okay. Isn't there another theory out there that somebody touched a box of cereal and something like that? Somebody touched a box of cereal. Brian touched the box of cereal, and then you take the box of cereal home. You own a knife sheath. You unsnap it. There, you've transferred Brian's DNA onto the knife sheath. That's what people say, right? Isn't that how it goes? Isn't that how it goes? That's not how it goes because once you buy the box of cereal, his DNA is no longer on there. It's your DNA, not Brian's. That's not how it happens. Chapter 53. There were, however, non believers in Koberger's guilt, partly because of what they'd heard online about the alleged weakness of the prosecution's case. Some online sleuths had even been charmed by Koberger's public profile as a tortured soul, and social media threads about his innocence proliferated. For what appeared to be in the first time in his life, Koberger started getting love letters. They arrived at the Latah County Jail by the handful. And maybe even AR delivered a couple. Criminologist Michael Artfeld, one-time police detective and now co-director of the Murder Accountability Project in Washington, D.C., a think tank assisting in the investigation of unsolved murders, was not surprised that some wanted to believe in Koberger's innocence. It's traumatizing to think that there are people wired like this, Artfield says. People don't want to believe in monsters, but if the information that emerged publicly about him was true, Koberger had all the telltale characteristics of an organized night stalker, someone who plans his killings, then preys on his victims in the dark. And he's probably a psychopath, Artfield adds. A neuropsychiatric disorder marked by deficient emotional responses and lack of empathy, psychopathy often results in antisocial deviance and criminal behavior. But Armfield could also see why Koberger's supporters remained unconvinced by the actual evidence against them. Other than the DNA, it's circumstantial. And amateur investigators tended to think, mistakenly, that circumstantial evidence is inherently weak. But before the millions of cameras in the United States, he observes, that's how almost every crime was solved. Armfield's years of experience led him to believe that in addition to psychopathy, Koberger most likely suffered from paraphilias or atypical sexual fantasies. And he's probably weapon focused. A lot of time would be spent thinking about it, shopping for it, looking at it. The K-bar knife was long. The female victims on King Road were small. One could imagine their stalker obsessing about such a weapon's power over them. The average psychopath, it's careful to add, doesn't roll out of bed one morning and immediately take up murder. It represents the graduation of previous offenses. In Koberger's case, there could be a precursor attacks in the vicinity of where he was living or working that are interests of law enforcement. There may even have been previous violent crimes. Koberger is not a serial killer by definition, but the crime has many of the hallmarks of serial homicides, targeting strangers, paraphilic in nature, excessive violence, stalking and planning, reconnaissance of the location. He adds, and the victims are typical of doer's a serial doer's fantasy. Someone the offender sees as a type of ideal partner that they could never have. Very public facing, attractive co-eds. Koberger might not have killed before, Arntfield is saying, but if he was going to kill, then the young women on King Road make sense as his victims, given Koberger's inability to connect romantically with so-called popular girls. Serial killers have to start somewhere. Do y'all believe that BK couldn't attract co-eds? Because I've heard a lot of people say, man, he could pull some women. He could pull some women. What do y'all think? Do you think he could pull some women? Do you think he could pull some co-eds? Paraphilic. Paraphilic disorder, also known as paraphilia, refers to a sexual interest in atypical objects, situations, or fantasies that deviate from conventional norms. Thank you for that, Jeff. And that kind of goes with what we were talking about one night as far as Mr. Koberger could have possibly been fantasizing about abducting one of the females. Possibly. While police had yet linked Koberger to any other crimes, some of the results of their search of the Koberger family home in Pennsylvania raised disturbing questions. The application for the search warrant had spelled out that police were looking for, among many other things, any property belonging to the victims or the surviving roommates of the King Road homicides, since killers often take trophies. While there were no items belonging to the victims cataloged in the search inventory, it was noted that 2 ID cards had been found inside a glove that was stuffed inside of a box. Dateline later reported that a source had told them the ID cards were the driver's licenses of 2 young women, neither of whom had been associated with the King Road homicides. 2 women who Koberger had apparently known in the past, and whose licenses he had hidden away in a glove, which was hidden away in a box. They don't just roll out of bed and commit murder, Armfield had said. It was a graduation of offenses. Chapter 54. Chief Fry, of course, was a firm believer in his case against Koberger. The evidence pointed to him, but so did the sentiments of many of Koberger's past associates. Within 1 hour of releasing Koberger's name to the press, Fry said the Moscow PD had over 400 callers to their tip line offering additional troubling information about the man. 400! And as media dug into Koberger's past, a pattern of hostility toward women emerged. What Fry definitely didn't want was so much media presence that when the time came for Koberger's murder trial, it would be hard to find an impartial jury in North Idaho. That is one of the reasons that we're holding everything close. We're protecting the integrity of the case, he told News Nation. We want unbiased individuals in this case. We want people to not know all the facts. If too many local people knew too much about the case beforehand, the trial would be moved to a larger county, which it did. and Fry wanted Koberger to be convicted of the quadruple murders in the place that had been affected the most. Even if that wasn't a possibility, Fry was hopeful about the prospect of his community being given an opportunity to heal. Things were a lot different than just 3 weeks earlier, when Chief Fry and several of his officers had appeared at the King Road residence with a U-Haul, pickup trucks, and official police vehicles to personally collect the victim's belongings. The team had lugged boxes and plastic storage containers across the ice-covered communal parking lot, looking like a family helping one of their own move boxes. Fry himself had attempted to back the U-Haul up the driveway, but the slope was so icy he'd stop halfway. He let the truck gate be opened right there, and for most of the morning, Fry and his officers had done the intimate transporting of the four victims' earthly possessions from one arm to the other. Somebody carried a bag of shoes, somebody else lugged the laundry hamper. There was a white desk chair on wheels being carried. Then two cardboard boxes had been stacked into the arms of an officer with the words State Police in solid white block letters across his back as he puffed out cold air. Nobody had spoken during the very grim undertaking. Now Chief Fry and his team felt a sense of cautious optimism. Nothing would bring back the King Road victims, but the mood was lighter and almost everything had immediately changed. I think that gives a great relief to our organization, a great relief to our community, Fry said, and in this case, the state, the nation, and I think even the world. Chief Fry had spent nearly 2 months being scrutinized on the international stage. Millions had watched his every move, so he knew the global impact of Koberger's arrest. When confronted by a reporter about whether or not he felt vindicated that his investigation was now being seen, in retrospect, as relatively expedient given the challenging and horrific circumstances, Fry answered humbly, "What I feel is we did our job and we did it right." He said, "We're not a prideful group." It hadn't always been so easy, procedurally or emotionally, for many of his officers. Fry had brought in mental health counselors for members of his team who'd been closest to the case, something he'd been advocating for in the police department for years. It was 4 people murdered with the use of a knife, Fry said. He paused and added, "There's things that you don't forget when you go on one of those calls." The blood alone was enough to cause nightmares. Each human body holds roughly a gallon of it, and 4 gallons were at least partially spilled that night inside 1122 King Road. The unfortunate truth about blood loss, however, is that losing just 20% of the body's supply can be fatal. Complete drainage, known in the movies as bleeding out, is infrequently the cause of death, says forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Baden, host of HBO's Autopsy and an expert consultant in some of the world's most infamous murder cases. In fact, the body most often bleeds into itself, Baden explained, particularly when the vital organs have been attacked. Most of the blood required for life usually remains inside of us. He is saying, just not where it belongs anymore. If you're stabbed in the chest and yet you end up on your back, there may not be any blood observed because the blood is pooling in the abdominal areas. It doesn't come out of the stab wound except by gravity. If the body is turned over, the blood will come out. Photographs of the exterior of the King Road house, with blood having found its way down the foundation, seemed to indicate gravity had been working against at least one of the victims. So there you have it. There's the explanation of the blood stays inside of you more often. Baden adds, and you don't die from the stab wound. It cuts through nerve tissues and the skin, and you feel it. But a death usually occurs from the loss of blood, which takes time. The bigger the blood vessels cut, the quicker the blood loss to the brain. which is ultimately the cause of death in a stabbing incident. The brain turns off after it doesn't get enough oxygen. The brain will go first, and then the heart follows. Several minutes could pass before death by stabbing. There are exceptions that are grotesque to think about. Occasionally, a stab wound to the skull from a heavy knife with a strong person with a puncture to the brain can cause loss of consciousness. But other than that, a stab doesn't cause unconsciousness immediately. So that makes sense that Xana wasn't immediately killed. And the same thing with Kaylee. This seems to imply that the King Road homicide victims may have lived until their attacker had left. Depending on their wound, the victims may have moved themselves away from the initial point of the attack, and they may have known that they were dying. For police officers like Chief Fry and his team visualizing the crime scene as they found it, it was bad enough. To picture the moments before the victim's death was horrific. Just reading that just makes me see them moving around trying to get help. First responders saw what others weren't allowed to see. The images were often imprinted permanently and sometimes caused psychological fractures in those whose job it was to see them. Absorbing that pain was the cost of justice. The brain goes first, Baden had said, and the heart follows. Part 11, Chapter 55. Dana Cornoto's funeral in Post Falls was officiated by her former gymnastic coach, Todd McLean, serving as pastor for the proceeding. The intimate ceremony began with the singing of the first stanzas of an 8th century hymn, Be Thou My Vision. Anyone who knew the entirety of the lyrical call to God might have appreciated that the later stanzas weren't sung. Be Thou my battle shield sword for the fight. Dana's farewell wasn't the place for invoking more violence in the world. A good name is better than fine oil, McLean began his brief sermon, quoting Achilles, and the day of death is better than the day of one's birth. There were sniffles from the attendees outside the nearby Coeur d'Alene Mountains were collecting new snowfall, and the Spokane River ran cold and crisp as it swelled through turns of the snow-muffled forest. When a child is born, we can be happy for the parents, and we can be excited about the potential for the child, but we don't have memories to look back on. McLean explained earnestly. We don't have the experiences that can bring us joy when we reminisce on them, but rather today we can share memories of our dear friend, and these memories can bring us measure of comfort. And that is what Xana's mourners did. They told stories, with McLean taking the lead. I knew a few days after I found out what happened to Xana, my daughter and I were sitting at our place of business and talking about it. He said, fighting against tears. We were struggling. We'd been glued to the news, just like all of you have been. We were wanting the answers. We were angry at times, felt sad at times, confused, felt empty inside, felt like we'd been kicked in the stomach, and the nauseating feeling just wouldn't go away. His breath was audibly catching. But then my daughters brought up a memory, he said. When Xana and his daughter Sydney were in grade school, they tried to become Instagram and YouTube famous by producing video content about their daily lives, like the Kardashian family, who'd built their brand on just being their quirky selves. McLean played Xana and Sydney's first effort for the mourners. The two girls on the screen couldn't stop laughing long enough to finish filming. My name is Xana. I'm 12 years old. And then giggles. The sound of Xana as a young girl crackled in the air. It was a hard sound for her mourners to hear, but there was a noticeable lightening of the room too. Dana had been alive after all, and in her life there had been laughter. Through technology, it transcended the passing of nearly a decade, and it transcended the darkened passages that her loved ones had been roaming without her in the weeks since her murder. By the time Xana's older sister, Jasmine, spoke to the mourners, the mood was still lifting. In describing their childhood together, Jasmine said, "One time she threw a roller skate at my shoulder. She laughed. It seemed to good naturedly sum up their relationship. Dana had been wild and fun," Jasmine recalled, and while the two had fought like cats and dogs growing up, by the time they were both in college, Dana had constantly told Jasmine how much she loved her. Her voice breaking almost every syllable, she added, "I don't know why our time was cut short, but I know that God has a plan." On her Instagram account, Jasmine had posted about some of Xana's writing from her recent English class at the University of Idaho. She had written about the song Blaze, a remix by the electronic band Louis the Child, whom the music lover had seen in concert. "It is a song I will imagine her dancing to each time I hear it," Jasmine wrote. "Ordered up 100 roses, need a Benz like Blaze. Blaze, I'm just whipping Maserati," were the lyrics. Xana, the girl on body cam footage at King Road, holding her driver's license nervously in her hand for the police, worrying about being under the legal drinking age, even when the police themselves hadn't much cared. Xana, the girl who rarely wore makeup, whose natural blush that summer with Ethan before the murders looked to have come from sunlight and love. Being Instagram and YouTube famous, like the Kardashians, her coach had said about her desires, dreams that were fueled perhaps by having survived the sometimes difficult circumstances of her childhood. Like so many of her generation, she longed to be seen and acknowledged, an ambition she was carrying into womanhood. On TikTok, in front of the Sigma Chi house, she did a round off. She did a back handspring and landed on her head, crumping into herself with something like laughter and pain at the same time while somebody filmed. She wore a wizard's cap, held a magic wand. She did the running man dance. She hid under blankets, made monster faces at the camera. According to the police documents, Xana's phone showed that she'd been logged into TikTok just before the homicides at around 4 a.m. Xana had been scrolling, maybe even checking the likes on her latest video. Whatever audience she had, they of course couldn't have seen what happened to her that night. Like very few things, it wasn't filmed. But after they certainly could imagine, and Xana's audience was now very big. Her voice carried across the distances. Wow, that was pretty tough. That was pretty tough. That was pretty tough right there. That was a tough one to read. Let me continue on. A few months, or chapter 56. A few months after Brian Koberger's arrest, Stacy and Jim Chapin set up Ethan Smile Foundation to raise money for college scholarship they hoped to provide to the students from Skagit Valley where they lived. Helping to fund the foundation was a new venture with their friends at Tulip Valley Farms who were promoting the Ethan Smile mix of yellow and white tulip bulbs. The white was the brilliance of his smile and life, and the yellow symbolized his cheery attitude. Ethan's mother had a video created to promote the foundation. She stood in front of the tulip fields where weeks earlier she'd been interviewed on a national network with tears in her eyes. Now she wore a lavender toned hoodie with a screen print of a yellow tulip on the front. "Life without him is tricky," she said of Ethan, the wind tussling her hair. She had a bouquet of tulips in her arms, as if holding on to her son. Some of the proceeds of their family foundation would also go to the University of Idaho for its own scholarship purposes. Stacy and Jim's organizational skills seemed to offer them a pathway through grief. They had no illusions what they would get to the other side of that grief anytime soon, if ever. They just understood that sinking into it could make it worse. They forced themselves to embrace a positive attitude, given the nightmare they were living through. As difficult as it was, we try to stay way over in our happy lane, Stacy says. Wake up every morning, put your best foot forward under really shitty conditions. To that end, Jim and Stacy had granted very few interviews and had stayed away from the media spotlight as much as possible, other than to promote the foundation. When they did briefly open the doors for that reason, they were bombarded. We agreed to talk to some press, she says, planning, planning a brief event for a few regional outlets that she and Jim felt comfortable talking with. Little did we know, every single news organization flew to the farm because they knew we were going to be there. She and her husband also had film companies chasing after them, hoping to lock down production rights to the Chapin family story. It was overwhelming. We had a producer fly out the other day, she says. We have people coming that are Emmy Award nominated. I don't know what to make of that. It doesn't change the outcome. The Chapins had hired a public relations gatekeeper to shield them, and they were making every effort, she says, to take the high road through their suffering. That included not hanging on the anger at the person in custody, Brian Koberger, or to whoever might have convicted of having taken their son's life. We're not going to that trial. I don't care about the outcome. A guilty verdict wasn't going to bring Ethan home to their family, and it was a family that still needed her and Jim to be emotionally healthy if they were going to thrive. Our two kids have a tough road, but they got to be kids and they got to have lives. And educations and children and families, we have to move forward. It hadn't been easy. The initial weeks had nearly crushed her and Jim's souls. One day I was out walking by myself, she told a local Fox reporter in one of her rare interviews to promote the family's tulip venture. I was crying so hard I happened upon somebody and I thought they were going to call 911 on me. Now she had reconnected with her purpose as a mother, as a wife, and as a citizen. Their family motto has always been go big or go home, and the family have found a way to adhere to that. By spring, their foundation had sold over $200,000 in merchandise from the tulip operation, including 83,000 bulbs, 1,300 Ethan Smile sweatshirts, and 750 fresh cut bouquet of the blend that had been named after their son. Their daughter Maisie had recently been named the Sweetheart of Sigma Chi, the fraternity Ethan had been a member of and their brother Hunter still was, an honor that meant Maisie was now officially allowed to wear the Sigma Chi letters if she chose to. The fraternity as well had recently established a scholarship fund in honor of the memory of Ethan Chapin, who entered Chapter Eternal on Sunday, November 13th in Moscow, Idaho. Said its donations page, which had quickly raised $125,000, a hefty $100,000 beyond its original goal. Maisie posted for a photograph in front of her brother's brothers. She wore a light blue dress and a heart-shaped charm around her neck. She clutched a bouquet of red and pink roses. Hunter was in the photograph too. All of them were smiling, like Maisie. All of them were her brothers as well now. A few dozen young men who had her back moving into the future. The only brother missing was the one Hunter and Maisie had spent 9 months in the womb with, their heartbeats in sync, and the following 20 years beside. It would be brutal getting used to Ethan's absence from their photos, but Maisie and Hunter had their own lives to think about too. Somehow they would have to. Their mother had a way she tried to think about it. We're still a great family, Stacy says. It'll just be four of us and a memory. Whoa. Wow. Chapter 57. The spring after the murders, Madison Mogan's family wanted to find a meaningful way to celebrate her birthday. Through social media, they encouraged the remaining of May 25th as Maddie May Day and urged those who had been following her case to commit random acts of kindness. pay for a stranger's coffee, mow a neighbor's lawn, the family's website suggested. There was a photo of Maddie in a pink dress, one hand gently playing with her hair as she stared into the lens. She looked like a portrait in a museum, painted in time that already seemed long ago. The family wanted people to remember the joy in Maddie's life, not the violence that had taken her. We were just so lucky to have her in our life for the time that we did, Ben Mogan said to his local Fox station about the inspiration for Maddie May Day, whose hashtag spread across social media beneath posts about good deeds offered in Maddie's name. There were photos of flowers and cookies given to strangers, boxes of donuts somebody had bought for their office mates, gift cards slipped into the palms of people who were struggling, whipped coffees purchased for employees at a fruit market, and hugs upon hugs doled out. Maddie May, I didn't know you, but I'm inspired by your story, someone wrote on Instagram. You make me want to live life to the fullest and be the best person that I can be. If there was a takeaway, Ben would have wanted it to be that. He remained in North Idaho, where Maddie's childhood felt omnipresent. He was working 2 jobs, some days with counseling sessions in between. I work a lot, he said, as if there was a sum total in his life now. And he was trying to move past the pain of losing his daughter. Other than to promote her birthday, he had been backing away from the media as much as possible. So had others associated with the case, like Jack Showalter, the young man who'd been at the grub truck in downtown Moscow with Kaylee and Maddie on the night of their murders. After being seen at the grub truck's live Twitch feed, turning his baseball cap forward and pulling his hooded sweatshirt over the top of it, Showalter had become known as the hoodie guy to social media sleuths and the mainstream true crime media alike. Before there was an arrest in this case, Showalter's image appeared in the broadcast of nearly every major network covering it. His alibi that he'd driven home overnight to see his family at 2 in the morning after a night of drinking and through wicked mountain passes didn't make sense to a bloodthirsty public in the seemingly endless weeks before a suspect had been caught. Although Showalter had been cleared by police, he received death threats online. The telephone numbers and addresses of his family had been doxed, and once it was discovered that his parents, both physicians in Boise, had money, Showalter was really cooked in the opinion of the amateur sleuthing community. Some suspected the Showalter family was politically connected and avoiding accountability because of it. One person falsely claimed that Showalter's uncle may even be the state attorney general. Even Steve Gonsalves had briefly thought Showalter was a viable candidate for suspicion, since the whole Showalter family had reportedly flown to Africa immediately after Jack drove home on the night of the murders. Some people came to us and said that he's out of the country. He didn't take a DNA test, Gonsalves told the New York Post in the initial days of the investigation, so we would like police to tell us what his alibi was. Gonsalves' suspicions and his demand for more information about Showalter were understandable to many. His daughter had been murdered, and somebody was supposed to go down for that. Any father would ask questions. By December, Showalter had gone into relative hiding with his family on their 2-acre property in the foothills behind Boise, with the drape closed on the windows of their big family house. There were paparazzi at the end of their long private drive. Once Brian Koberger was captured, none of those early suspicions mattered anymore. But they mattered to Showalter. Hoodie guy was just a college kid when all of this had started. And now there were untold millions of social media hits linking him to the crimes. Those links and his emotional ties to the victims would never go away. Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk had also endured rumors that they'd been involved in the homicides. Most of the speculation derived from the puzzle of why neither had called the police until almost 8 hours after their roommates had been killed. Dylan took the brunt of the harassment, especially after it was learned that she'd heard cries and other unusual sounds, and had heard a man say, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." She had even seen a masked man leaving their home. And then, what? She pretended nothing had happened and went back to sleep? She had to have known what the sentiment. She was called a killer by the online mobs. She was called a drug dealer by those who made false claims that she and her boyfriend were moving products and that the killings were related foul play. If Dylan had known or even just subconsciously feared what had happened to her roommate, although nothing appeared to have implicated her in that, there were trauma related reasons for a person to delay reporting violence. It is common to be seized by fear, and psychologists have seen a wide variety of responses to brutal crimes. Famously, an ex Buffalo University student who found her sorority sister raped and bludgeoned in bed called 911, but only because she thought her roommate was unconscious from choking on vomit. I only saw liquid, her hair caked on her face, tongue sticking through her teeth. Anna Zabel, now in her 50s, told a Daily Mail reporter, speaking in defense of Dylan Mortensen. Only after paramedics arrived and commented on the veteran being soaked in blood did Zabel notice it. The psychologist said it was a protective mechanism, but the wall had what looked like red broom marks. While Bethany had gone into hiding from the paparazzi in Reno, Dylan had also driven underground. When the Daily Mail had surveyed her family residence in Boise before posting a photograph allegedly of Dylan walking to a Starbucks alongside the caption, "The University of Idaho sophomore was wearing shorts in chilly weather and had her hair pulled back." The photo, blasted across continents, was actually of Dylan's younger sister, a 17-year-old minor, that hadn't set well with the girl's father, Brent Mortensen. "I'm a pretty big guy," he said, nodding to the physicality he could have used on the photographers if he'd been a different type of person. Dylan was his firstborn daughter, and she was also getting dragged through social media and the tabloids. All that shit they said about her, he was obviously hurting, and his daughter, like the Showalters, has pulled the drape closed. Oh, Lord. I think I'm going to stop right there. Let me go back and read what y'all have been saying. Yeah, the goats would tear those things up. Don't say hello. Are you still here? Y'all say hello to Leslie. I'm glad you're a little sore, but at least you didn't break anything. Yeah, y'all say, God, that sounded painful. Been a quiet day today. I had both of my babies all day yesterday, 3 years, and the baby is 5 months. I'm worn out, so I'm just vent out today. I just made some popcorn. Put some nacho cheese and some jalapenos on it. Sure looks like a friendly wave Jack Showalter gives if he's leaving the grub truck. Didn't notice till I zoomed in to see it better. I know, they'd always said he flipped them off or something like that. Rondi, I found the powdered versions of that today for popcorn, cheddar cheese, and jalapeno. I couldn't get it out of my mind after last night. I hope you like it. I hope you like it. It is good. Cheese and chilies for the popcorn or for the baby mountain Mama mentioned. Popcorn. I need a statement from Jack Showalter's sister, and it broke my heart. It is true. Put some salt on it. My favorite part of popcorn are half popcorners. I wish they made a popcorn that was gross. I don't like those things. They will eat anything, so probably eat chilies and cheese. I'm weird. I like burnt popcorn. Everybody has their preference. Does the word explain what kind of porn Brian watched? Does that word explain what kind of porn Brian watched? It kind of does. It kind of does. I mean, it's out of the ordinary. It's more like predatory kind of. It's out of the ordinary. Like it's not normal. I mean, normally you don't want people sleeping or drugged up that you're wanting to be intimate with. I mean, I I don't know. Deviant? Yeah, you're right. Hey Jeff, I put your not sure Elantra in a short and it's gotten a tons of views. I meant to put your name in there, but I suggest you go and clean that image up and you put it up yourself. And I think you will do fine with the views. Dang. I mean, I put a lot of shorts up today. I guess I need to sign on as a premium member to X to be able to stream over there. My friend that Bundy killed liked to burn popcorn, so her daddy didn't know. Damn. Hi, Leslie. How was your day at work? How was your day at work? How was everybody's day? Did y'all have a good Wednesday? It is hump day, you know? It's like the week's half over. And I'm hungry. I'm like thinking what I'm going to eat for dinner. Yeah, we're almost done with this book. I mean, it's probably like that much left to read. And then what I want to do is eventually finish Dr. Bricato's book, The New Evil. I mean, he'll have a new book out by the time I finish that one. And then Matt Murphy's book. I mean, there's just so much that, I can take my time doing. That 4 hour live last night was intense. It really was. It was intense. It was pretty cool. And I got some good feedback on it. I've seen some creators that I haven't seen in a while doing live today. And they were talking about how they had comments or something. I don't know. I try not to listen to a lot of people. I was busy doing all kinds of stuff today. Taught a class. I'm teaching a class tomorrow. Was that book that Brian liked called The Handmaid's Tale? I don't know. I think Nina knows. You should read that. I don't like reading those old books like that, Jeff. I don't know why. I just don't. I don't care for it. I'm old and I don't get all these different types of porn and text letters and words that mean different things. I'm just glad that I'm not into the dating scene. I'd be so confused. Yeah. Me too. Me too. I'm glad I have a good girlfriend and, being single for a long time just makes you appreciate good things. You know what I mean? If you're not old, you're just seasoned. There's a difference. But did y'all like my intro? I think I'm gonna play that every time that I do Idaho 4. And I did a new outro, so y'all will get a chance to see it. So thank you so much for being here. I hope you guys have a wonderful night. Maestro, cue that music. Here we go, guys.
Mic drops heavy, echoes in the air. Glitch in the matrix, a digital snare. 808's booming, the bass line's cruel. Lasers cut sharp, bending every rule. Neon lights flash, pixels collide. Track drums march, techno takes a ride. Farewell to the stream, the vibe's not done. Looping the wave, till the next one. Such screaming, the rhythm's a chase. Wires sparking, electric embrace. Chat goes silent, the room fades black, but the beat still lingers. It's got your back.
There we go. Maestro queued it up for you. Hope you guys enjoyed this Wednesday night live. Like I said, I'll see y'all again soon. Y'all enjoy the popcorn. Y'all enjoy all of this. Y'all take care. Bye for now.